and welcome to Pitch It. How is everybody doing out there? Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we have a few people in here in our studio, and I do see some people out there on YouTube as well. If you have something that you would like to pitch, feel free. Join the fray. Come on in, but you're going to have to go to autocrit.com/live, follow the event page so you can get that Zoom link so you can join us here. But if you do not want to go through all of that, if you have a quick pitch, like that quick, like true elevator pitch, it's this meets this or something like that, feel free to put it in the chat as well, and we can give feedback on that. So at whatever level you would like to participate, it's up to you. But we certainly would love to hear your pitches. So before we get to some pitches, because I want to give a chance for people to join in with us or chime in out there with your pitches, I'm just going to do a quick little reminder, and that is when you're developing your story, something to keep in mind, which is who is your audience? Yes. This can really help you not only be more effective as a writer, but it's helpful to know kind of where you are going with it, right? If eventually you're going to want somebody to read your work, or publish it, or anything of the sort, if you have a sense of mind of who that person is, who is going to be your biggest fan, who's that person that's going to dress up like one of your characters at Comic-Con or whatever it is, if you have a sense of who that is, it can benefit you a lot in terms of what you put into your story, and it also can help you in a situation like this when you are pitching your story. Oh, lady says she has some ideas. That is great too. Yeah, if you just have some ideas and you're kind of seeing, is there potential to this? Should we develop it a little bit further? And you can do that as well. So let's see here. Oh, wow, we've got quite a few going on. All right. I have one from, it looks like Lisa was first. Now, Lisa, I am more than happy to read your synopsis here, but if you would like to read it yourself, give it for something, you're free to unmute your mic as well. It's up to you. What would you prefer?
Please, you read it. That way I can hear it too myself, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
right. That's a good idea, right? It's always helpful to get another feeling. All right, so what we have here, it says middle grade. Sherlock Holmes meets a bug's life while visiting Lemony Snicket. Okay, super sleuth Minerva Mendel hears bugs, not just their chirping and buzzing, but they'll tell her anything she wants to know, like what they enjoyed for dinner and how the masked man took the diamonds from the safe. All right, so I like this in many ways. I like the hook of a character with a superpower that's clear, and but also how they're overhearing something that ends up becoming like the witnesses of a crime, essentially. So that's fascinating. And Beth and Gareth, you can join in with me. Do you have any questions you have for Lisa off the top of your head when you heard that pitch? Like, what came to mind?
The first thing that came to my mind was the three parts that you put together at the very beginning. Can you say those again for me, Daniel?
Just a second here. I'm trying to
It's
get
gonna
you.
pull me into
I'm
the
trying to get you
into
on the screen for the people out on
It's
YouTube so that you're not
Sherlock
distracted.
Holmes meets It's a Bug's Life while visiting Lemony Snicket.
the first
Good night.
two. The first two make sense, and I think the third one, Lemony Snicket is the series of unfortunate events, so it's kind of a gothic-y YA middle reader sort of thing. I like it. That Lemony Snicket part ties in when you talk about the diamond stealing, I think, is the vibe that it gives me. Very interesting. I did love the hook, and I like that it's phrased in a way that gives a little preview of what the story would be about. I don't have any other questions, but I liked how those three things came together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say one thing before we get to Gareth about this hook is that it does tell me what the character is good at. and it also tells me a little bit of the conflict, but it doesn't specifically spell out to me how that ties into the character exactly. It tells us that the character knows information, but then it doesn't quite let me know what are they going to do with that information. Are they going to therefore try to become a vigilante detective? Is it somebody they know? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't quite understand the
Right.
implications for the character in terms of what they want. How does it tie into their goals? Things like that. What do you
I
think,
had
Gareth?
another I had another one of these, but this is the first time I've been on here. I just found out about this today, which this is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Um, but so I didn't know how much space or how long or how short you wanted it to be. So I tried to find the shortest one I had and went with that one.
Yeah, and,
I like it though.
yeah.
Gareth, what are your thoughts? Oops.
I was muted. I like the I like the hook. Talking to insects or being able to communicate with insects is always generally a good one. Go to my roots used capably in Dario Argento's Phenomena to horrific effect. But one thing that kind of catches me here is the character referred to initially as a super sleuth, and
Mhm.
then gets all the information from insects, which are generally everywhere. So in the initial pitch, I feel something perhaps a little overpowered, OP about the character in that sense. So I wonder if there are, let's just say, quite literal snitches everywhere to lead her down the trail. What's the challenge for her? What's difficult about this on her side when she can just ask an insect and he can say, "Yeah, I saw him go that way."
Oh.
And then but I quite like obviously we know it's going to be a big mystery, and that's why we have the super sleuth and everything, and it fits nicely into that sort of middle grade area. There's nothing here that sounds too serious, or I get when you say Sherlock Holmes meets A Bug's Life and Lemony Snicket, I get the idea of the kind of levity and general tone, so that's good. I would just like to kind of get more from it in terms of kind of what Daniel said, that challenge for the character, because it sounds like things might be too easy.
Okay. Oh, now I wish I'd used the other one.
Oh,
'Cause
it's
it had all
okay.
those
It's all
things.
right.
Oh no, that's great.
Yeah, in terms
I mean,
of
maybe there's only.
yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Go ahead, Dana.
In terms,
Maybe there's only one type. We're terrible at this today. I'm gonna mute.
no, you're fine. Go ahead. I'll stay quiet.
Maybe there's only one type of bug that she can communicate with, and maybe they are like her minions. Maybe they can get information from other bugs and bring it like a team effort.
Right.
But I like. I didn't think about the challenge concept, but so I'm glad Gareth brought that up. That's a good one.
And I mean, it makes me think, and it's probably just because it's still in my head from last night, but my wife was watching some new Disney movie. I think it might have showed up on Disney Plus, about a young girl with a superhero squirrel that she befriends. And
Ulysses.
yes, that was it. And for much of that film, from what I could grasp, I was only kind of side watching it while I played on the Nintendo Switch. But the child character, the lead character, she didn't really seem to do a whole lot. There wasn't a lot she had to overcome. Of course, she's running around after Ulysses, but quite literally by the end of the movie, the squirrel's doing all the heavy lifting.
And I wish I had a squirrel to do some.
I know, right?
How do I get on this show?
All right. So tying in that together, in terms of me, Lisa, in terms of a read or a pass, it really would be, I would say on the pitch alone, I just don't have enough about the protagonist to root for them to kind of get that hook. The talking to bugs is interesting, and the idea that bugs can observe crime certainly makes it interesting. But to Gareth's point, I'm not sure where the challenge is, so I would need a little bit more on that. However, if I read it, if I picked it up and, I could get into the prose, and if you really do capture that sort of Lemony Snicket vibe, which is a fun voice and things like that, totally would keep reading. It's the type of thing that I would enjoy. So that's what I would look at.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you.
You're welcome. All right, you want to move on? Anybody? Any other thoughts? Gareth, Beth? Okay.
No, from my perspective, I would certainly check it out to see more.
Yep. And to Salissa's point, Salissa's like, isn't the point of a pitch to make the editor want to ask more? That is true. So the worst reaction is when, it's just indifference, right? It's like, eh. So that's not that's not the kind of reaction that we just gave. So that's good. I would say though, you do want to make things like character motivation, conflict, a little bit clearer. That's all. Kim Walker. For my novel Lenswoman, a child of the turbulent 60s, a talented young photojournalist simultaneously navigates both the film and music industries and tumultuous romance with a brilliant young director who proves to be the love of her life. Okay. Do we have questions, Beth or Gareth, off the top of our heads on this one?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna get caught up real quick. My phone rang right in the middle of that. I'm glad I was
You're
muted.
fine.
So Gareth, over to you.
From the description there of the pitch, it's kind of outside of my wheelhouse, the general interest as well. But I'm seeing the word turbulent and tumultuous seems to be stepping in for ideas of the actual conflict of the story. So I want to see more of what's the actual hook here, or the things that you might have to overcome, or what stands in the way. Because if this is a romance, sounds like it is a romantic story, there's obviously going to be the conflict between them, stuff that's preventing them coming together until they do in the end, eventually, or they grow to become closer. So there's usually always one big conflict, and I'd like an idea of kind of what that is. What are they going to? What is their love going to be facing? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I feel like I'm missing that driving force. The 60s is a fun time period, so that's great. I mean that that I could see that working well. A photojournalist who's simultaneously navigating both the film and music industries is not something that is not really a hook exactly, because it's descriptive, but it doesn't exactly explain what they're doing. To me, like, I don't quite understand, like, is it that you have, I mean, it's a woman in the 60s. Is this kind of a woman trying to go into a man's world? Is this a person who has some shortcomings they're trying to overcome in this job, things like that? And then when you talk about navigating, and then she has to navigate both her job and the romance, but it doesn't really make it clear as to why that's something you have to navigate, right? Plenty of people meet somebody on a job. I mean, I met my wife at work and it wasn't any major plot. So I think there probably is something there. You're just not telling us, right? There's some sort of conflict of interest, or maybe there's a reason why they shouldn't be together. And to Gareth's point, when you're dealing with a romance, it's always will they get together? Won't they get together? And that's really the hook of it. It's a boy meets girl, girl meets boy. This is what keeps them apart, or whatever the relationship is, this is what keeps them apart. And that's really the story. So let's see here.
I'm with
So
the guys on this one, about having both in there, both of the potential conflicts in without much detail kind of waters them both down. So it might be an option to pick the major one if you're going for an industry navigation with pitfalls and corporate greed, or something conflict happening there. Focus more on that one, or focus on the love story conflict, because that could be really rich and emotional as well. But having them both there without a lot of detail, I'm personally more interested in the tumultuous romantic relationship, because navigating some industries sounds pretty corporate to me, and it doesn't have a hook unless there's greed or death or something in there. So I would kind of pick one and focus on it and give a little more detail as to what major source of conflict there might be.
all right, any other thoughts? And Kim, you feel free to chime in too if you want to give us more information. You can. I see you have another pitch, and we'll get to that as well. But I would say based on the pitch alone, it's not enough to hook me. However, could I be interested in a romance with a photojournalist and a brilliant young director? Very possible. I just need to know what the drama is, if that makes sense. What's the thing that's keeping them apart? What's the thing to overcome? What's their shortcomings? What's their flaws? Those sort of details. The setting is great. The characters are great. I like romance actually, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, from my perspective, the industries are certainly interesting. I think what you've gone with there, film and music, and of course the director on the film side is the male protagonist, is really good. There's lots to get in there, so it could make for some really good storytelling and events for them to go through and everything. I just need a better idea of what is the unique conflict at the heart of this. What's different, and what is especially forceful that they have to get over.
All right. Now, Kim has another one, but we do have lots of people in here, so feel free to chime in with a pitch as well. I think that she is the next one we have up, though. So let's go ahead with that. And it says, oh, yes, Alyssa, absolutely. We can get to you as well. Do you want to go ahead and give your elevator pitch, Alyssa? I love a good elevator pitch.
She's like, unmute, I'm not ready. We better take the elevator to the top floor while we're.
Now I gotta change my
grabbing her.
Okay, so this is the elevator pitch, all right? So Matthew Thorenson boards a cruise ship expecting to celebrate his sister's wedding. This is romantic suspense. Instead, he finds himself fighting for his life, his livelihood, and his sanity. Betrayed by his older brother, Matthew has 10 days to find a way to survive his past and save his future. That's the elevator pitch.
Okay. I'm
The
intrigued.
longer pitch has more details.
Yeah. I'm intrigued. Wait, can you repeat that one more time? Because there's
Yes.
something that stood out to me that I want to bring up.
Okay, so hang on a second. I get my phone to cooperate. Matthew Thorenson boards a cruise ship expecting to celebrate his sister's wedding. Instead, he finds himself fighting for his life, his livelihood, and his sanity. Betrayed by his older brother, Matthew has 10 days to find a way to survive his past and save his future.
I think where I'm struggling, I really like it, but I do want to know just a bit more.
Yeah.
What is the nature of the betrayal? Betrayed in what way? Is that like
Longer pitch.
what?
Longer pitch. It's in the longer pitch.
But I mean, like, do you mind telling me? Like, what does his brother do?
Oh, his brother publicly accuses him in front of the family of embezzling family funds.
I feel like that should be in the pitch. I feel like you don't have to be as vague. I would say rather than say he was betrayed by his brother, he could say what you just said. After being accused by his brother of publicly embezzling because I just feel like otherwise it's a little vague because I'm not sure what is at stake. I mean, you tell me his sanity,
Okay.
but I just feel like you need a bit more because it feels a little bit coy otherwise. If that makes sense.
I read the other pitch that goes with it? It's not long, it's just longer. That has more
Yes,
detail.
I would love to hear the longer one.
Okay. Matthew Thorenson is trapped on a cruise ship with nowhere to run. He's only there for his sister's wedding. Matthew is ambushed when his older brother, Luke, publicly accuses him of embezzling funds from the family estate. Luke is secretly determined to destroy Matthew's reputation so he can steal his inheritance. The paper trail is strong evidence, and no family member will listen to Matthew as he claims he's innocent. No one believes him. He has until the last day of the cruise to stop his brother, or else he loses everything: his job, his family, perhaps even his freedom. He's forced to turn to the one other passenger on the ship who knows him. She's the only person he can trust, his former fiancée, Tracy. She believed in him once. Can she let herself believe in him one more time?
I love it. There's so many things about it that I like. I don't know.
Goosebumps. Goosebumps. I would read this.
Well, one thing I love about it is just that claustrophobia, like for a thriller. It's so much fun. And the idea too is you don't have a lot of technology on your hands. You don't have a lot of resources on a cruise ship because, I mean, even if you have the internet, it's like $1 million a minute, and maybe
Wi-Fi
they don't.
sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you don't have that. And I love the fact it has this ticking clock that's a cruise, and I love the contrast of okay, there's all these people enjoying themselves on vacation, and meanwhile he's on hell on earth. It's excellent. I really love it. Like I want to read it. I want to read it really badly.
Well, you're in luck, Daniel.
Right?
You made my day. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really do like
Yeah.
it for a lot of reasons because there's just so many things that make me want to ask questions like good questions like, yeah.
Yeah, the physical barriers and the time boxing that you're putting around that just immediately give me that sense of suspense and tension. A race against the clock. I liked the longer pitch that gives more detail about all the family strife. Makes it much more clear and hooky. I like that very much. And then bringing in that romantic part really takes me on a ride, even during the pitch itself. Of there's thrill, there's intrigue, there's high stakes, big conflict, and then maybe some romance. So
I like too the fact that you have that she believed him once, will she believe him again? Because it's like, so this is the first time he's kind of had to ask this person for a favor, it appears. So that's interesting in of itself. It makes me want to know that history, in a good way, like, yeah. But yet I don't not that it would be a problem for a actual agent or a publisher to give away what happens, but as an audience member, I definitely am interested to know what happens. So that's great. So now if there is like a super awesome twist that you have a way for the protagonist to get out that people aren't really going to predict, I wouldn't necessarily keep that to yourself if you were pitching to somebody within the industry, which I'm sure you know. But I can understand not want to sharing it here because, just look for that book. We'll talk about it here on Pitch It when it comes out. You heard it here first. All right, let's wait. Gareth, do you have anything to say?
I could be a little harder. I like the general story setup. I love these kind of as you say, claustrophobic one setting kind of things where you can't just run away when you're stuck on a cruise ship with all this. However, from the pitch, it did become clearer with the longer pitch than the shorter one. However, I still thought the longer one still didn't give me a concrete idea of the energy or genre of the story. By the end, it felt like it might be a romance overall. But before that, with the very short description, I thought, okay, we got an action thriller on our hands here. But then the longer description, something like being accused of embezzlement, and what's the outcome of that if he doesn't clear his name by the time he gets on shore, is going to prison, basically. So that doesn't lead me down the path. And if it's a boat full of family members, I was thinking the very short one that you gave is an ideal, the kind of blurb you see on the back of a DVD box cover for a movie. However, that kind of short thing on the back of a movie cover is then supported by imagery of like the cruise ship exploding or somebody swinging on a rope and this kind of stuff that tells you, right, this is a slam bang action flick starring The Rock, and you kind of know where you are. But even in the longer one, I didn't really get that. And I couldn't tie it together in my head thinking, okay, so this is a boat full of family members for a wedding. I doubt the cruise ship is exploding by the end. I doubt there are family members shooting at each other or pulling knives out. And, maybe there are, and that would be super exciting. This kind of knives out type family battle royale on a cruise ship sounds super interesting, but that might not be the story. And I just couldn't piece that fully together in my mind from the big thing. So it's kind of, this is a thriller, this is high octane, or this is more low key.
Yeah, it
I would
felt
like to
more.
change my.
It felt a little bit more psychological suspense. I got more of like Alfred Hitchcocky out of it than
Mhm.
The
A
Rock.
little more psychological suspense.
Yeah.
I'm just officially going to change my vote from read the book to watch the movie with The Rock.
I don't think
I'll
that's
be
really
waiting
who
for
she
that.
had in mind.
Oh,
I could be wrong, but am I correct,
no.
Celissa? Is this more along the lines of like Stranger in a Small Town or something? Or Strangers on a Train? Sorry. Murder in a Small Town, Strangers on a Train. Is it more like that? Or is it more like does it turn into a high octane action spectacular? I think you're muted.
When you are on a 10-day Caribbean cruise, there are quite often ports of call, and several things happen when they're allowed to get off the ship and go on land. And they're all different islands that are owned by other countries. And oh yeah, there's a whole lot else going on.
Yeah,
It
okay,
kind
well
of
then
has else going on Barbados.
to Gareth's point, you need to hint at that because
Okay.
I'm somebody that I'm totally okay with, like, I mean, partly because I come from theater world to some extent. I'm okay with like trap world, people just talking with each other and family angst. But for somebody more like Gareth or the typical person, you want to hint at those explosions. Because they're like, when's it gonna get fun and exciting?
Yeah, again, you've got depending on sort of who you're pitching it to as well, because from their perspective is, well, what am I buying?
Right.
And if there is going to be offshore action here and car chases potentially and things like that, that might be right up my alley. However, you kind of leave that out, then it sounds more like something that's confined too much and perhaps, to Daniel's point, they're more talky than actiony, and that's going to put me off if that's the impression I get.
I
Yep.
think that's a good point, Gareth, that I would also apply to Kim's pitch earlier, because sorry, I'm just going to scroll back up here and make sure I'm thinking of the correct one. Because just as Gareth said, he was very intrigued by navigating the film and music industries. I was not intrigued by that. So thinking about tailoring your pitch to the audience, if they are more likely to go for thriller, espionage, and navigating film and music industries, excellent. If they're more likely to go for mushy romance and family drama, maybe tailor your pitch a little bit differently, but nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. If you're really turning into something like North by Northwest and the person's going to go on this grandiose adventure and it's going to start to become action set pieces, then that wasn't quite the impression I got from your pitch. So, all right, let's move on to Jim, who gave us Blood Island Brooch. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. The mangled body of a woman is found entangled in the rocks surrounding Charleston's Fort Sumter. Retired homicide detective Jack Hennessy tries to find out who killed her and why, while at the same time overcome demons of his past. What he discovers is more sinister than he imagined. And it's a couple paragraphs, not too long, but I'll keep going. Hennessy agrees to hunt for the killer because the son of an old friend asks him to investigate. Jack is tormented by guilt for failing his friend during a murder investigation years ago and hopes by helping the son he can make amends. He learns that the Blood Island brooch, a priceless pendant the victim always wore, is missing, leading him to believe the African American woman was killed for the gem. Hennessy's search forces him to confront explosive racial divides. He runs afoul of some very serious African American tough guys who, at the point of a gun, order him to stay away from the women's murder because it ain't no white man's business. However, through perseverance and charm, Jack gains the trust of those men and through them learns there are bigger issues at stake. He discovers the real motive for the murder is the theft by mafia-backed property developers by land owned by heirs, those former South Carolina slaves. It is a scam worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Heirs property preservation is a real issue in the South today. This is a story of murder and betrayal on multiple levels. In the midst of it, the COVID-19 virus complicates matters. Wow, there is a lot going on. Okay. So, I would say, obviously it's a bit long in terms, but I do understand, from a high level, what is going on in this story. My concern might be that you are trying to do a little bit too much, although it's not impossible. I mean, if you look at something like Gareth mentioned it, Knives Out certainly includes a lot of social type commentary amid all the action, but it's done what seems to be a lot more subtly than what's going on here. So that would concern me. My concern whenever things get very topical, especially in the moment, you talk about like the COVID-19 virus and things like that, is just I worry of whether or not it's going to be enough of a narrative or if it's a little bit of the author just kind of getting their opinion out about some sort of political matter, which I love reading politics. I love reading stories. I generally like to read them separate. So I tend to prefer narratives that are, not as mixed in all that. But I do feel like there's just a lot going on. I worry about the complicated nature of the plot, a bunch of different, just a bunch of different. It sounds like you had a lot of ideas, and maybe you tried to get too many in one book. What did you think, Beth and Gareth?
I agree with Daniel on this one. It sounds like, and I've been doing a lot of work on theming lately. Sounds like there's a lot of themes at play here, and generally we recommend 1 or 2 max per novel to really keep the reader focused and leave them with a very specific feeling when they're done reading your work. So it might be possible to narrow in a little bit. The other 2 just specific concerns I had were around the working in of modern COVID-19 implications might be a little difficult, and we don't know how that's going to age from a novel perspective, although it might be fine, and it might, who knows, but that's a creative decision. The other one, actually, as I'm thinking through it, became not a concern because it was the African-American references, but it set it up perfectly for the racial tension conversation and the subsequent, heirs to the previous slaves, etc. It'll be a delicate topic to address, but I do think focusing in a little bit more on 1 or 2 themes in general might clarify it for the reader and for the pitch recipient.
Yeah, from my side, initially the first few sentences you had me, I was like, okay, great, mystery thriller kind of setup here. We got a detective and everything. I think the COVID-19 thing kind of stands out, and it may not be as you intend or as it's even used. Kind of just, it feels like it's sort of shoehorned in there at the end of the pitch. It's like, oh, by the way, COVID-19 also factors in. It seems like seeking topicality at that point. I'll just be like, okay, well, that's kind of pasted on. However, if it's central to the story and actually, I'm assuming it does maybe, but affect a lot of the possibilities of things these characters can do and how they can travel, things like that, then it's potentially worthwhile because, we do have a good number of good thrillers that are set during these kind of disaster type things like New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina. Lots of great stories set around that as well. But the event or the surroundings that, in the example of Hurricane Katrina, to those good stories is central to the setting. It's almost an antagonist in itself. So it really has to have that much importance. If it doesn't and it just feels kind of tacked on, I would leave that to the wayside. The only other thing that really kind of stood out to me as needing a bit more refinement is an idea of the uniqueness of your protagonist, the detective. I don't know, it's kind of how many times we've seen stories with the ex-cop or the hard-boiled cop who's carrying the weight of a dead partner or a failed hostage or something on his shoulders. What is it about the character that is different and stands out from the reams of other detective characters that could stand shoulder to shoulder with him? I'm sure there are probably things about him that are quite different in that way, but make that clear for me quite quickly when you talk about him in the pitch.
Those are all really, really good suggestions, and I thank you for that. In fact, as I was listening to some of the earlier pitches, I realized that this one was too long, and the one I sent you, and I would have ended that through perseverance and charm. He gains the trust of those tough guys and learns there are much bigger issues at stake. Full stop right there, rather than going on. As far as the COVID-19, I added that in there because, and you're right, it is topical, but I don't get political about it. It is relevant because one of my major characters develops COVID-19 throughout the novel. We find out in the beginning, he's got a cough. he's just, excuse me, I have a cough. And he subsequently, throughout the book, gets more and more and more ill, so that by the time Jack solves this murder mystery, this other character has died from COVID. This being such a real issue today, and historically, I believe, will become, with 500,000 people in this country dead now, I think that this will be relevant for quite some time. So I wanted to add that as for historical reference in the book. Yeah, in the pitch, it's tacked on at the end. It kind of just like, oh yeah, by the way, COVID-19 is involved. But that's why it's involved with the novel. But thank you for your input. That's very helpful.
That's good. I would say if it does have such an impact on the story, that's a really good way to thread it through with one of the characters, especially if it's a character that we follow the whole time and like.
Yeah.
You know, it's a real statement.
Yes.
So yeah, I would just, if it's not actually playing any part in the story beyond that in terms of the wider world, you know, kind of holding them back because of things like lockdowns and travel restrictions and all that sort of stuff being obstacles to the characters. If it's just one of them has it and eventually dies from it and we find out that's the cause, leave it out of the pitch. It's something that will be, it's almost an Easter egg in the story once you get in there.
Yeah, good. Okay, I wondered about that.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone back and forth on that. And Garrett, you've answered my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, in terms of it dating itself, it's certainly going to be something that will be talked about for decades. So it will date the story in terms of we're going to know when it took place, at least theoretically. We'll see what happens. But theoretically, we will know when the story takes place based on this. I mean, certainly based on their reaction to it, right? Because let's say, you know, we don't know what the future holds, but if it ends up being kind of a regular thing, the reaction is going to be different than the characters in this book. You'll know from the reaction of the characters, this is a book that took place in, you know, 2020, 2021, you know, or 2020.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to do that. I didn't want to make it a political issue, and I don't get involved in the politics of the virus, but it's like a little thread that just kind of weaves through the storyline. So.
Makes sense.
I love, I like that you were able to give a better description of how it's used, because the fact that people are getting sick and they are dying, that is fact, and it's not going to change or be distorted as it would be if it were a political statement or a larger part of the story. So absolutely, yeah, that's going to age fine. It's just truth, rather than making statements that may then, for political matters, be like reversed. Or I think you handled that really well, and it gives a very human aspect to the characters.
Yeah.
The other issue that I think can be, having heard you read the pitch, I can eliminate a lot of the stuff about what the larger issue is. The larger issue is this theft of property that's owned by descendants of former slaves here in South Carolina, which, as I indicate, is a really big issue here.
Oh, yeah,
and it's a true issue.
Yeah.
But getting into all that in the pitch, I think, really bogs it down. And I don't think I need to do that. I can just say there are larger issues, and if you want to know what they are, read the book.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I would say that since it does tie into your storyline, all I was saying is that I would be. It's one of those things. As long as it's handled sensitively and thoughtfully, it can be great, you know, but it's easy to kind of go off the rails, and it doesn't sound like you are, so that's great. But you know, that would just, whenever I read something like that, when it is front and center like that, it just makes me a little bit concerned about.
I did a great deal of research about this. In fact, there's an organization here called Heirs Property Protection Society or something like that. It's a support group for these landowners. So I went and I talked to them, and that storyline is based on things they told me that actually happened. So
interesting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, to that end, from my mind, I would say for the pitch, one of the things I kind of got from the pitch, with it being so long, is in that ending area, you're kind of trying to explain what these land grabs are, kind of what's going on. Leave that part out, but mention it, that he discovers it all ties into a wider problem with, the taking of land and things like that. So you can get it in there, but just truncate it.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Because they can always Google, and they probably know, but they can always Google, you know.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Okay, cool.
All right. So,
Excellent. Thank you very much.
thank you. All right, let's move on to our next one. Sandy, an aspiring author in the throes of a midlife identity crisis, escapes her tailgate Texas life for a solo writing retreat in the mountains. But a case of writer's block and a stranger's bucket list sends her on a soul-searching journey to finally pen the end. Okay. Um, this is definitely not in my wheelhouse in terms of the types of books that I like to read. Just in terms of me being an audience member. My biggest concern with something like this is, honestly, if there is enough going on at stake, or if this is kind of one of those soul-searching stories that's a little existential and, you know, it just, for me personally, not something that I would enjoy reading. It gets into that literary fiction category, which can often feel like kind of much ado about nothing in terms of what's happening. You know, I tend to like, not quite on the Gareth level of blood and guts and gore, but I do tend to like conflict and intrigue. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to work. I honestly, for something like that, unless there is a major story element that you have not told me, what would make me either be okay reading it or not is really the prose, because that's where, if you have that really elegant style and it's just like really beautiful, and there are some people that can literally write something and it's like they're writing their trip to the grocery store and you like reading it. If it's like that, then great. Otherwise, it just doesn't have enough conflict. It doesn't have enough story hook for me personally. What do you think, Beth and Gareth?
You want to go, Beth?
Sure. I'll go. He must have seen me hit the unmute button. I kind of agree a little bit with Daniel. My questions are more around specific word choice in the pitch itself, because there are things in there that I don't quite understand. A midlife crisis or an identity crisis, but a midlife identity crisis kind of confuses me. So I'm not sure what her inner struggle feels like in terms of potential conflict or what she's really trying to sort out. And a tailgate Texas life, the tailgate phrase is pretty ambiguous. I'm not sure that would have broad understanding of what it really means. Is it lonely? Is it drinking in a parking lot? Is it rodeos? I'm not quite sure. And, you know, why she would want to escape it. So perhaps there's something else underneath that that would more clearly state why she wants to escape it. Those were kind of the things that caught me right up front, is just knowing a little bit more about that potential conflict and the conflict she's leaving behind and the new one that she's going to face, how that plays with her internal one. Maybe there's a little lack of focus on all three of those, maybe just focusing on one or two if there's a subplot in there. And then I'm intrigued by a stranger's bucket list. So opening that up a little bit would be interesting to me. Who is, you know, send her on a soul searching journey, but is it also a physical journey? Because I feel like bucket list often has to do with travel and seeing the world and accomplishing things before you kick the bucket. So I'm interested to unpack that a little bit more and add more to give away the conflict and reveal what that physical journey might be.
Okay. Yeah, from my perspective, I hope this is useful. Don't take it all too hard, hopefully. But as a kind of pitch itself, I get on the initial read a notion of, I think, kind of like Daniel said, this kind of literary navel gazing, which is totally outside of my wheelhouse or interest sphere. But I want to say just a few things about the pitch itself that I think you could improve throughout. So the opening line, you have an aspiring author in the throes of a midlife identity crisis, escapes her tailgate Texas life for a solo writing retreat in the mountains. So it doesn't really catch me there. I don't really know anything of great detail about this character or anything interesting about this character. It's kind of how many times have we seen aspiring or, I guess, flagging authors dealing with writer's block who disappear off to somewhere to write. Immediately, when you read that, there are hundreds of characters from all across the spectrum of storytelling that come to mind. And in various stories, things can end up horribly for them, or it can all go well. And we've seen it just all over the place. So I want to know something more unique about this character. Make her stand out to me. The construction that you use here for this little pitch as well is you follow on from that initial statement to but a case of writer's block on a stranger's bucket list sends her on a soul-searching journey to finally pen the end. So it's like the goal of the journey that she goes on is to write, but the goal of disappearing on a solo writing retreat in the mountains is also to write. So there's something there that's missing in terms of a conflict for me. So whether she's just escaping up there to pretend to write or something, I kind of need an idea of the character's headspace at that point and why that makes for an interesting drama. What's kind of going on up there, or what's she dealing with, or what's she thinking that's really in the way? What is it? But like Beth said, the idea of the stranger's bucket list is intriguing. That's a nice little hook. So how did she come across this? What is it that it makes her feel? And all of this. So if I were reading the pitch with the option of buying the manuscript or optioning it in some way or whatever to produce it, I think I just don't really know enough about the experience of the story here to make a decision on that front. It's what's it going to make me feel? What's the intention of this book? Do you want people to get to the end and just be in floods of tears? Is it a real heart-render of a story? Is it a personal kind of awakening, adventure, heartwarming thing? What is it? So think about that for the pitch. Is what is it you want ultimately that readers are going to feel when they read this? And try and wrap some of that in. So really two things that I always like to see in any pitch that really hit is, number one, what's the feel? What's the emotional promise that the book is making? What's the experience going to be for me? I need to feel that from the pitch. And also uniqueness. So what is it about the characters or the story or the conflict that stands out against everything else of the same kind of ilk? Because let's be honest, we can all write stories about, and there are plenty about aspiring authors, but those characters are not all the same, and they all have their own intriguing, unique hooks. So find that as well and wrap that in. I think you'll have a much stronger pitch.
Yeah, I think to Gareth's point about character, when I think of this sort of genre, it's kind of like the romance genre in a way, in that the plot is not paramount, and that's fine. Nobody picks up a romance because they expect to be surprised by what happens. I mean, people joke around about that with like Hallmark movies and things like that, but that's fine. That's not the genre. The genre is about character, it's about setting and things like that. And then so I think what's missing from this pitch that would work, since, the whole kind of finding a list, going on a soul searching venture, I've seen that before, but that's fine. I've seen, people have a meet cute and then they have problems and they get together a million times. What makes those stories work is that character. So what we're missing is the unique voice of what the book is going to feel like, and what makes your character special. Why do I want to spend time with this person? Because this is very much a story about spending time with a person. Obviously, you're going on a soul searching journey with them. So what is that hook for the person, if that makes sense? So, all right. Are we good? Okay, moving on. We'll move on to Bob, and I think this will be our last one. All right, so Tumble is, it looks like a pretty long one. Okay, Tumble is a powerful and emotive 6-book series of, I don't even know how to pronounce this word, vaticinating the fate of humanity after a geological anomaly in the lithosphere 249 kilometers west of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. An undiscovered legacy of an antediluvian disaster unleashes a force majeure synonymous to the Archean eon when titanic upheavals were quoted in. The formidable kinetics of the body waves propagating away from the hypocenter nudge the oceanic and continental tectonics into each other, provoking thousands of major earthquakes along the convergent boundaries. Coastlines around the world are placed on a tsunami alert, and an insuperable underwater landslide undermines the Indian subcontinent to the west and southern Thailand on the east. It was the day that nature made her presence felt around the globe, but it was the catalyst for a disaster so cataclysmic that even the Andaman event appears facile by comparison. All right, so what we have here is a lot of world building. I do have a sense of the genre based on your word choice that this is in that kind of like hard sci-fi sort of feel, like it's really trying to ground itself in reality. You certainly have a lot of information here about geology. It's not that it's a bad hook, but what it isn't really to me is a story pitch, because what this isn't telling me is who's the protagonist, what's their goal. I don't know about who my viewpoint character is going to be. You've set up a world where something terrible happened, and that is interesting, but I would say in a pitch that you're going to a general audience or even to an age or something, you literally would just want to say, there was a cataclysmic geological event that caused X, and therefore, character, if there's a villain, if there's, I need to get to that, because based on this, all I could tell you is what the setting of the world is, which is not the same thing as a story. Beth or Gareth?
Yeah, I would agree a lot. I think if I were to receive this as a pitch, or if you kind of walked into an office and sat down opposite me and said this is a pitch, I'd probably just stare in confusion as to what's actually going on. There's a lot of detail in here. For example, I mean, the world building setup there at the beginning is great, but that could really be crushed into, like Daniel said, a cataclysmic geological event has unleashed disaster across the globe, dividing subcontinents and leading to, whatever. And 2 sentences or 1 sentence is enough to do that. And what stands out really is where are the people in this pitch? Any kind of story, it's the people that we care about. That's really what storytelling generally is all about, is empathetic connection to people and as they go through these challenges. And really in this, I'm thinking a 6-book series with no people is odd. So I need to get an idea of what we're dealing with in terms of characters and why I want to take this journey with them throughout this disaster, because the disaster hook is always cool. You gotta love
big rocks
big scale
moving
disaster
around. That's
stuff.
fun. You got my interest.
Yeah, so just make sure that's in. It's cut all the jargon, split it that up into 1-2 sentences to set the scene for me, and then tell me about the people we're going to follow and why I should care.
Wow, it stinks to have to go third here, because I agree with the first, with both Gareth and Daniel on this one, especially at the very start of the pitch where it says it's a powerful and emotive 6-book series. Emotion is driven by the characters, and I would love to see that in just front and center. I really liked the second paragraph, and for me, distilling it down, as Daniel and Gareth both recommended, and making it more dramatic in simplifying the language and talking, it was the day that nature made her presence felt around the globe. That hooks me. Like, what?
Yes.
So having that be kind of even the opener, and then bringing in the characters and the people and the human to build that emotion and talk about the ramifications. I don't necessarily need to know in the pitch all the geographic details, but if you are going for hard sci-fi or any sort of hard science, it's necessary that you do have that research and incorporate that in drips and stuff and drabs throughout your novel to prove it, because hard sci-fi, as we know, the audience will definitely call you on it if you don't have it dialed in. So it sounds like you've done a lot of great research and have a lot of terrific information. The pitch, I would want to see the humans and feel a little more dramatic, simplify that language, go for the drama.
Yeah, I gotta say that line, the day nature made her presence felt around the globe, is really good.
It's good. and then the fact that that was just the beginning is great too, right? It's they had a horrible thing happen that disrupted all of our economies in the world, and yet that was just the beginning. Great. I totally can see that, because what you're setting up seems to be a world where, because of these geological shifts, and I'm not a geological expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I could imagine how that would create a ricochet effect and create more and more and more problems that the character is going to face. Another thing that we didn't mention is that I don't even know when this book takes place, because I'm not sure. It sounds like it all takes place after this event that you're doing in your kind of information, your exposition there. But does it, or is the first book about that first event? Like, I don't even really have a sense of that. Like, are we starting after that first event has taken place and then we're getting to the next ones, or are we going to get to watch that really big event in real time? That, and because it's a 6-book series, so it kind of makes sense maybe that the first one would be the first book, and then maybe it keeps going, it gets worse and worse. But I don't even have really a clear sense of that. So, to everyone else's point, I see a plot device or a setting. I don't see a story here. So from that, I wouldn't be able to say I'm a read, although a story about some sort of major change in the world based on a geological event, I could totally get behind. And if you have a 6-book series and apparently you planned it all out, that might tell me that you're an architect writer. And so you have the whole thing planned out with a bunch of different story arcs and stuff like that. And you're going to pull some sort of amazing, Walking Dead sort of thing where it's like character and intrigue and stuff. Then great. I love those kind of stories. So if that's what you have in store for me, great. But show me those characters, please.
Yeah, lead with that for sure. Cool.
All
And if
right.
after all those disasters, giant monsters come out of the sea, you've got me for sure.
Then Gareth is
if
definitely a
the
thumbs up.
Lovecraftian tentacled monsters make their appearance, then,
Are there tentacles involved? If so, then yes.
fantastic. Or it's like Tremors, right?
Yeah.
Or Dune. Yes. And then the aliens arrive. Yeah, no, exactly. When you do say too, the disaster, it's going to look even worse by comparison. Like, I mean, because we don't have a sense of where the people are at, that doesn't carry as much weight. But then also it does make you kind of wonder where you're going next. So you did seem to dial it up to an 11 at the beginning. So that's kind of intriguing when you say it's going to get worse. So I'm with you. I'm with you to some extent. So just hook me with characters. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today, or this evening, or whenever you're watching.
Hey guys, if I can ask your
Oh.
indulgence,
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we say goodbye, whoa, I've been listening to you. I did a little rewrite,
Okay.
made it much tighter, and may I run that by you real quickly?
That's fine. I think, Beth, though, you have to head out, so.
Yeah. I have to go teach the line editing lab, so
Okay.
I will leave you in Daniel and Gareth's capable hands, and I will see you all again very soon.
Thanks, Beth.
By the way,
Yeah, my
line
pleasure.
editing laboratory is excellent. Just putting that plug in there. All right. So back to you, Jim.
Okay, real quick. So the rewrite is this: the mangled body of a woman is found entangled in the rocks surrounding Charleston's Fort Sumter. Retired homicide detective Jack Hennessy tries to find out who killed her and why, while at the same time overcome demons of his past. What he discovers is more sinister than he imagined. Hennessy agrees to hunt for the killer because the son of an old friend asks him to investigate. Jack is tormented by guilt for failing his friend during a murder investigation years ago, and hopes by helping the son he can make amends. He learns that the Blood Island brooch, a priceless pendant the victim always wore, is missing, leading him to believe the African-American woman was killed for the gem. But he learns a bigger issue involving explosive racial divides is at stake. A massive land grab scheme is victimizing descendants of former slaves, a real issue in the South today. This is a story of murder and betrayal on multiple levels.
All right, Gareth.
Any better?
Yeah, quite a bit better. The only thing I would potentially adjust in the writing is where you have the part where it leads him to believe she was killed for the brooch, simply mention that it's missing and then say in his search for the brooch he uncovers. Makes it a bit more active on his side, that he digs his way deeper into a bigger thing.
I like that. Okay, great. Thank you. See, I knew there was a reason to read it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you need the whole he has guilt and he hopes by doing this he's going to make amends. I mean, that's a writer choice. To me, that's inferred. I don't know if that's necessary or not.
Isn't that the conflict?
Yeah, no. I'm saying you shouldn't get rid of the whole he feels sorry about the past. I'm just saying I don't know if you need to include, but by doing this he'll fix it. Because I was there, but I don't know. That might just be me.
Okay.
Just to trim it up, because it still feels like it is a bit long. So I was just trying to figure out a way to try to trim that up a little bit for you. So I don't know. Gareth may completely disagree with me. What do you think, Gareth?
It could go either way. I mean, part of it is kind of wrapped up, and it's perhaps a little more enigmatic if you simply mention tormented by personal demons. Then we kind of want to know more about him.
I do not need to explain what his demons are in the pitch, I guess, is what you're
Not
saying.
necessarily, yeah. Although you do end up falling into kind of going that way, that sort of little cliche trap of, again, it's another noir-esque,
Yeah.
you know, the hard drinking, tormented ex-detective or whatever who's trying to make amends for the past. So I think there's something missing in the character that overcome that potentially. If you can kind of work that in, whatever angle is there that's part of him that makes him more interesting than every other sort of cookie cutter tormented detective. Find that nugget and get it in there.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. I was just looking at Kim because she had one last thing before we head out.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there were any elements in my query that I should move into my pitch.
Yeah, I'm looking. There's certainly a lot more information in here than I got from the pitch in terms of the type of story it is. It's a very different story than I had in my mind, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, I completely thought of it a different way based on the pitch. So,
Yeah, there's 3 paragraphs, and I figure there must be a couple of lines in there that if I added them to the short pitch, it would help.
Yeah. I will say that it does make me a little confused as to what I still am a little bit. I have a lot more detail about kind of what happens, but I'm still a little bit confused as to what it all adds up to in some ways, because it really does feel like it's a combo. What'd you say?
It is a romance novel.
Yeah,
It's Lensman romance of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, it feels. I'm trying. So it's basically like a historical romance, and it's a kind of adventure almost as well. It feels. I don't want to like mislabel it, but kind of Outlander-ish, where it's a bunch of sequences of kind of adventure and intrigue and mystery and then romance kind of intertwined.
It's like Eat, Pray, Love without the praying or eating.
I like that. What do you think, Gareth, looking at this?
The more detail is good. I would certainly work that into the pitch. I like the, fearless photographer.
I do
Maddie
like
Garfield,
that.
Girl with balls of steel, uses her camera as a protective barrier when shooting rebels in Berkeley. That kind of that's straight up, okay, you got me. There's just something. There's something more to this character.
Right.
She's got balls of steel. I'm in for that. And egotistical rock stars. Again, I get a good impression there. I think then you can kind of miss the middle description of the little bits, because reading that, what it makes me think of, because you go from an acid trip, breaks a few hearts, captures a moment of death, smuggles hashish, which I would definitely leave that one out. It's a potential immediate negative character trait that may put people off the character, even if it's accidental. You read something like that and you're like, okay, drug smuggler, not really kind of into that. But the other bits, when you read them in that kind of order, it makes me think that the story itself might be quite unfocused and feel like simply a series of vignettes that lacks an overall through line to tie it all together. Not that that's potentially what the book is, but it's just the perception you get from seeing all these little things laid out. So you can wrap all those up into one sentence, like kind of through a series of adventures or whatever way you want to put it, a series of events and the things that she goes through. You can wrap that all up in one and still keep it compelling. And then that ends with she meets many men. Skip the rest, including the frogs trying to be princes, and then just skip straight to, she meets many men, but none can compare to a charismatic writer-director Jake Morgenstern. So we don't need all that middle detail there, and especially in a pitch or a blurb even. And that's it. Also with each encounter through the next decade, I would leave that out because, again, you're setting up an extended timeline there, and it starts to make me think of potentially being a bit of a slog to get to the end of. Is this going to be too extended for me to deal with? Just in terms of a timeline, because most stories tend to be, I think generally most devices kind of constrict the timeline as much as you can to have the events happen as quickly as possible. So leave that out. It's not that doing it any differently in the actual content of the book is going to be a problem, but just for presenting it to me. And the same thing with shooting with Jake on location for 3 months. We don't really need to know those big details. So really, it's nobody compares to writer-director Jake Morgenstern. And as their love deepens, another jealous fashion model, vindictive studio executive, nor stampeding buffalo can keep them apart. Now, I like that at the end. However, I wonder if it's perhaps a little too much, because I want to get a notion of the romantic will they, won't they. Again, that sort of conflict that's always in there of what's keeping them apart. What am I afraid they're not going to get around so that they can be together? And I'm assuming there's an element of that in the story. There generally sort of always is in romances. And I'd want to feel that at the end, because when you say none of these things can keep them apart, then that's just kind of telling me the ending. It's like, okay, they're going to be happily ever after. And I kind of need a notion that they might not be, even though we know they are,
Well, it's part of the romance trope that they have to have the happily ever after. So
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, Gareth, if I agree with you on that one. I feel like because I see so many pitches and blurbs that are like happily ever after guaranteed, because there's just so many people that they have to have that. I don't know. It's like they want that security, but
Yeah, well, I think most people, we kind of know it. So the same thing is, if it's a romance story, we know they're going to be fine in the end, but we want the excitement in the middle of assuming or believing for however many fleeting moments that they might not. That's the kind of adventure of the whole thing.
So they're challenged by the fashion model, vindictive studio executive, and the stampeding buffalo.
Yeah.
But we don't know how they're going
yeah,
to.
it's like, can their love withstand? But the one thing I will say about the way that last sentence read is it reads humorous, and I don't know if that's your intention, because you have jealous fashion model, vindictive studio executive, or stampeding buffalo, and that kind of makes me feel that has a tongue-in-cheek vibe, which I wasn't getting up to this point. So if you do have a tongue-in-cheek vibe, then that works. But if this is meant to be taken, quite seriously, I do think the way those segue into each other, it just, to me, it doesn't give me that, if that makes sense. So because obviously it just feels like all of a sudden out of the blue you're talking about stampeding buffalo. To me, it feels a little comical. It's like a non sequitur joke. And so I would wonder. To me, I'm still a little bit. I don't quite understand tone in this piece. Or to Gareth, I'm a little concerned about the focus of it, because it does feel like it's going to be kind of a series of sequences, and whether or not it's all going to tie together is a bit of a concern.
My challenge was I loosely based this book on my career, but because my career is very episodic, I decided to turn it into a romance novel, and the thread that pulls it together is her recurring meeting Jake along the path of her career until they work together and it consummates. So
yeah, exactly right. I think that's why kind of truncating those episodic bits in the pitch description, it helps you move that through line of him a bit closer to the beginning, so we don't lose sight of that as we go through the rest of the description.
Right.
That's the best way to kind of keep it on track. And if you're wondering about the kind of setting the tone and the things like that, one of the things I do like having at the end of any kind of written pitch like this is something that you would potentially email to publisher or whatever, is if you have the end there with the North Stampeding Buffalo, can keep them apart, just an extra little bit that says sort of the worlds of photojournalism and Hollywood collide in this romantic, give a bit more of a description. We kind of understand a grip of the two worlds that these characters are coming from that comes together.
Okie doke.
I am a little intrigued in Stampeding Buffalo, though. That sounds fun.
I wish there was time to talk about Katarina, because that's the book that I worked on during the entire plague year.
Oh. Well, we are going to do another one of these, so feel free to come on.
These will be regular.
Another Pitch It. We'll be doing these on a regular basis. And for those of you out there on YouTube, if you weren't here part of our Zoom chat, you can join us next time. Remember, you're watching a replay. You can find it on autocrit.com/live. Oh, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
I love it. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us this evening on Pitch It. So, what do I got here? So tomorrow we are going to have a couple of AutoCrit shows as well. We will be doing Writer Aerobics, which is up in the morning, and that's just our quick little story prompt, a few quick exercises. It's just a way to get your blood flowing in the morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, so very early for those of you on the West Coast. And then at noon Eastern, we will have a Wacky Words, which is our fun game show, and those are typical sort of word puzzles. We'll have tomorrow we're going to do opposite books. So it's books where all the words are changed to the opposite of what they should be, and we'll have to guess what they are. And we'll do a cryptogram and rebus puzzles. Just a fun way to put a little break in your day, chat with some writers, have some zany fun with words. Thursday, we'll do Writer Lens with Inception, the film Inception, which is a great work to study in terms of how to get out exposition, because that's a lot of the dialogue, because it's a very dense world building that Christopher Nolan came up with for that. So interesting how he pulls it off. And so we will check you out on any of those shows. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you, Gareth. We'll say thanks to Beth as well. See you all next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.